The aroma of slow-cooked pork cheeks and red wine drifted from the small kitchen, blending with the subtle scent of lemon and rosemary roasted chicken. I smiled with satisfaction, discreetly wiping the beads of sweat from my forehead. Everything was ready. All that was missing was the guest of honor. Today was a special day, the day my husband, Marcus, was officially promoted to colonel, 5 years since I gave up everything to follow him, and he had finally achieved his dream. I'd grown used to living in this officer's military base housing, accustomed to the identical apartments, the windswept hallways, and the curious glances of the other officers' wives, who always wondered how an orphan with no family like me had managed to keep such a brilliant and promising man as Marcus. I simply smiled. My happiness didn't need to be explained to anyone. I believed in our love. I believed my sacrifice had been worth it. The wall clock slowly ticked past 7, then 8. The splendid dinner I had so carefully prepared all afternoon began to cool, and with it, my heart began to shrink. I called Marcus, but all I heard on the other end was the endless, disheartening ringtone. My wife's instinct told me he wasn't in a last-minute meeting or entertaining an important guest. A vague sense of unease seized my mind. It was past midnight when I finally fell asleep on the sofa, exhausted. Finally, the familiar sound of his car engine resonated in the driveway. I woke with a jolt and rushed to the door, but the joy barely had time to be born before it extinguished. The door flew open and Marcus stumbled in. He reeked intensely of alcohol and an unfamiliar woman's perfume, a cheap, cloying fragrance that felt like a slap in the face. "Where have you been? I've been calling you all night," I managed to say, trying to stay calm, but my voice couldn't hide a tremble. Marcus didn't answer. He violently tossed his briefcase to the floor, his eyes bloodshot, locked onto mine. It was a look I'd never seen in our 5 years of marriage. There was no longer any tenderness or affection, only rage, resentment, and a hint of contempt. "You're back. Are you tired? I've prepared—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus interrupted me with a roar. "Shut up. Stop pretending you care about me." I froze. "What are you saying? I don't understand." Just then, a petite figure appeared behind Marcus. She was a young, pretty girl with a brazen expression. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. Her belly was prominent, at least 5 or 6 months along. She clung to Marcus's arm possessively and looked at me with defiance. In that instant, my world collapsed. My legs gave out, and I had to lean on a piece of furniture to keep from falling. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice broken and strange. Marcus looked at me with a cruel smile on his lips. "Can't you see? She's Zara, and she's pregnant with my son, a son you couldn't give me." Every one of his words was like a dagger in my heart. A son, so that was the reason. All the sweetness, all the promises, all the years of sacrifice had been nothing more than a farce. I was infertile, it was my greatest pain, and now he was using it to trample and humiliate me. The girl, Zara, nestled against Marcus, her voice syrupy. "Honey, I'm tired. I want to rest." "Of course, my love. Go up to our bedroom and rest," Marcus replied tenderly, the same tone he once used for me. Our bedroom. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you crazy? This is my house. She can't come in here," I screamed. All my composure shattered into 1,000 pieces. Marcus spun around, his gaze turning fierce. He moved toward me and grabbed my arm tightly. "Your house? Don't forget this apartment was assigned to me by the army. You're just a kept woman," he hissed in my ear, his voice dripping with venomous cruelty. "Listen to me well. Zara will stay here to see out her pregnancy. If you accept it, you'll remain a colonel's wife. If not, get out." His words fell upon me like a bucket of ice water, annihilating every illusion, every last hope. Get out. A word so simple, but with a destructive power greater than 1,000 insults. It completely negated the 5 years of my youth, the years I gave up my family and my dreams to be his rock. It turned out that in his eyes, I was nothing more than a dependent who could be discarded at any moment. I looked at the man I once loved with all my soul. His face now seemed so alien, so cruel. The pain inside me seemed to exceed all limits. It was no longer a tearing agony, but transformed into a deadly, terrifying silence. The tears stopped falling. My heart seemed to stop beating. I felt a chilling emptiness take hold of my entire body. Seeing my silence, Marcus thought I was scared that I had accepted my fate. He released my arm and his tone softened, tinted with false generosity. That's better. Stay in the guest room and don't bother Zara. I'll make it up to you later. Make it up to me? He thought he could compensate for this betrayal with money or material possessions. I burst out laughing. A dry, bitter laugh echoed in the room. Marcus and his mistress looked at me in surprise. Perhaps they thought I'd gone mad. You're right, I said, my voice surprisingly calm, without a hint of a tremor, with no trace of resentment. I can't accept it, so I'm leaving. Marcus frowned. The surprise on his face turned to anger. What did you say? Do you dare? I dare. I looked him directly in the eyes. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. at the military court, we're getting divorced. Having said that, without deigning to look at their faces, I turned and headed for my bedroom. Not the small room he'd just granted me, but the one that had been our room. I needed to reclaim what was mine. I didn't take much, just my documents and a few personal items. I didn't even need a suitcase. This house, these objects, everything was stained with falsehood. I didn't want to take anything with me. As I opened the closet door, a small photo of our wedding that was taped inside fell to the floor. In the photo, Marcus and I smiled, radiant with happiness. The memory of that day came back to me. The day he knelt to propose, promising to love and protect me for life. The tears I had tried to hold back burst forth again. I quickly dried them. No, Skylar, you can't cry. You can't appear weak before those who have trampled you. The love was dead, completely dead. I picked up the photo and, without hesitation, tore it in two, then into four, and threw it in the trash. It was my final break with the past. When I went out to the living room, Marcus was blocking the door. His expression was a mixture of anger and disbelief. You're really leaving in the middle of the night? Where do you think you're going? Do you think you can survive without me? That's none of your business, I replied coldly, trying to pass him, but Marcus held me back. Skylar, don't make a scene. I was just angry. Go back to the room. We'll talk tomorrow. His voice became falsely gentle. He was scared, not of losing me, but of the scandal affecting his honor and his newly minted colonel's career. A docile, submissive orphan wife was better for his image than a noisy divorce right after a promotion. I knew him too well. Let go of me, I growled. I've told you already, tomorrow at the court, if you don't show up, I'll file the petition myself. Seeing my determination, Marcus's patience ran out. He abruptly pushed my hand away. Fine, if you want to leave, go see how long you last without me. Don't come back crying and begging me. I said nothing more. I opened the door and stepped out into the cold night, leaving behind the house that was once my home, leaving behind 5 wasted years of my life. I walked aimlessly in the darkness, not knowing where to go, but I felt a strange lightness in my heart, like a bird that has been caged for too long. I knew a storm awaited me outside, but I yearned for freedom. I spent the night awake in a modest motel near the bus station, a place where no one would recognize me. The room was small and old, but at that moment, it was 1,000 times safer a refuge than that luxurious military apartment. I sat by the window, watching the deserted street, letting my mind wander in a whirlwind of emotions. When the dawn broke, the pain was still there, latent in my chest, but the weakness had disappeared, leaving only a cold determination. At 9:15 sharp, I was in front of the military courthouse. Marcus arrived 15 minutes late. He entered the mediation room with an arrogant air. His brand new colonel's uniform was impeccably pressed. He probably had a very pleasant night of celebration with his mistress. Seeing me, he gave a smile of superiority and pity. He sat across from me and placed a folder on the table. I thought you wouldn't dare come, he said condescendingly. Good, I don't want to complicate things. Here's the divorce petition I already prepared. All you have to do is sign. As for assets, the apartment belongs to the Army. You're not entitled to anything, but for old time's sake, I'll give you $50,000. Consider it capital for you to return to your hometown and restart your life. He pushed the folder toward me as if he were granting me a great favor. The court official sitting between us coughed slightly, visibly uncomfortable. I said nothing, simply opened the folder in silence. I didn't read the clauses about the assets he had written. I went straight to the last page where 2 blank lines awaited the signatures. Seeing my silence, Marcus continued. Don't think it's too little. For someone without a degree or profession like you, that money is enough to live comfortably back home. You should be grateful to me." Grateful? I almost burst into laughter. I was supposed to be grateful to the man who had betrayed and humiliated me. I raised my head and looked him directly in the eyes. "I don't need your money. Not a cent. The only thing I need is your signature." Marcus was stunned by my reply. The smugness on his face briefly turned to bewilderment. He couldn't understand why I was so calm and firm. Where was the woman who always obeyed him blindly, who considered him her entire world? "Are you serious?" "I don't have time for jokes," I replied. I picked up the pen from the table and the black ink flowed quickly over the white paper. "Schuyler James." My signature was decisive, without the slightest tremor. Each stroke was like a knife cutting the last tie that bound me to him. 5 years, a marriage, a misguided phase of my life. Everything ended with a simple stroke of ink. I pushed the signed document toward him. "Your turn." Marcus looked at me, then he looked at the paper with a complex expression. He seemed unable to believe everything was so easy, but his innate arrogance quickly took over. He shrugged, picked up the pen, and scribbled his name. "Marcus Valerian." "Done. Better this way. I hope you don't regret it later," he said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "I only regret not signing this paper much sooner." I got up without looking at him for another second. I nodded to the official and turned to leave. I walked out of the building. My steps were as light as if I were walking on clouds. The warm sun enveloped me, dissipating the cold that had accompanied me all night. Freedom. That word had never had such a clear and profound meaning. I was no longer anyone's wife. I was just me, Schuyler. A new beginning, though full of thorns, awaited me. "Schuyler!" Marcus's voice sounded behind me. I didn't stop or turn around. I didn't want to hear another word from that man. But Marcus ran and blocked my path with an annoyed expression. "Where are you rushing off to? After all, we were husband and wife, not even a final goodbye." His tone was mocking. "Or are you afraid you have nowhere to go? Do you need me to call you a cab to go back to your town?" I looked at him in silence like a stranger. My patience with him had run out. Just as I was about to reply, a deep, powerful sound was heard, growing closer. It wasn't the sound of one car, but of many cars advancing in unison. Both Marcus and I instinctively turned toward the source of the sound. At the end of the street, a motorcade of luxurious black cars advanced solemnly. At the head, a command vehicle with an Army license plate, followed by a long line of nearly 15 identical, gleaming sedans, gliding down the road in an imposing order and silence. The scene was so formal and powerful that everyone on the small street in front of the court stopped and moved aside to let them pass. The motorcade stopped exactly in front of me. The rear car doors opened simultaneously. About 30 military escorts in dress uniforms descended, quickly forming 2 rows of honor. The atmosphere became solemn to the point of being suffocating. Marcus stood paralyzed, mouth agape and eyes wide. Contemplating the incredible scene, he was probably wondering which high-ranking officer would have such a formidable escort. The main car door opened slowly. A man dressed in a lieutenant general's uniform, with gold stars shining on his shoulder boards, stepped out of the vehicle. He was tall, his hair already silver, but his back remained straight. His firm face radiated an authority that commanded respect. He looked at no one else. His eyes were directed solely at me, a look filled with love, pain, and contained anger. "Dad," I called out softly, my voice broken by emotion as tears welled up again. Marcus, after a few petrified seconds, finally recognized the powerful man. His face went from surprise to panic and then turned white as paper. His entire body trembled. His legs seemed to have lost all their strength. My general, what are you doing here?" he stammered, unable to articulate a word. My father finally directed his gaze at Marcus, a look as cold and sharp as a razor blade. There was no contempt in his eyes, but an abysmal disappointment, as if he were looking at something completely broken, irreparable. He didn't answer his question. He simply approached, took off his own military jacket, and gently placed it over my shoulders. "Let's go home, daughter. It's all over." I nodded as tears rolled down my cheeks. My father took my hand and guided me through the 2 rows of escorts standing at attention. I didn't look back, but I could feel Marcus's terrified and desperate gaze fixed on my back. I could imagine his brain spinning at full speed, trying to piece together an incredible truth. The orphan wife he had just repudiated turned out to be the only daughter of a lieutenant general. The irony of fate was too cruel. As the car door closed, isolating me from the outside world, I saw Marcus collapse onto the ground. His brand new colonel's uniform now looked ridiculous and pathetic on his crumbling body. The car started moving in absolute silence. Outside, the motorcade moved in perfect order, forming a solid circle of protection. I sat next to my father, my hand still firmly held by his. The warmth of his hand transferred to mine, gradually warming my frozen heart. Throughout the ride, my father didn't ask me a single question about what had happened. He simply kept silent, gently squeezing my hand from time to time, like wordless comfort. I understood his silence. It wasn't a reproach, but a deep pain. The pain of a father seeing his beloved daughter hurt. 5 years ago, I was the one who disobeyed his will, abandoning a life of comfort to follow a man I believed was true love. My father was adamantly opposed back then. He said Marcus was too ambitious and pragmatic, that he didn't truly love me. But I, with the stubbornness of youth, didn't listen to him. I even cut off contact with my family just to prove my choice was right. And now I was returning in this state, a broken marriage, a heart full of scars. I was wrong, completely wrong. "Dad, I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice hoarse. My father turned. There wasn't a hint of anger in his eyes. He just sighed and reached out his other hand to dry a tear from my cheek. "It's not your fault. The fault is mine for not being firm enough to keep you. The important thing is that you've come home. Skylar, our home will always be waiting for you." The car didn't head toward the military base housing. Instead, it turned onto a wide, tree-lined avenue leading to a strictly guarded private neighborhood of detached homes. This was my real home, the place where I was born and raised, the place I had turned my back on for 5 years. The white, classically styled house appeared solemn and majestic in the middle of a vast, meticulously maintained yard. Everything was the same, nothing had changed, only the hearts of the people were different. When the car stopped, the elderly butler was already waiting at the door. Seeing me, he couldn't hide his emotion. His eyes reddened. "Welcome home, Miss Schuyler." I walked in. The familiar atmosphere enveloped me. The faint aroma of sandalwood, the rhythmic tick-tock of the grandfather clock, the painting of a seascape in the living room. All the memories of my childhood returned like a slow-motion film. This place was so peaceful and warm, in complete contrast to the coldness and falsehood of that military apartment. I realized that for the past 5 years, although I lived in a house I called home, I had never truly felt a part of it. My father escorted me to my room. My bedroom on the second floor was impeccable and tidy. My old books were still on the desk. On the wall, the photo of my radiant smile on my college graduation day. It seemed like time had stopped in this place. "Rest, daughter," my father said in his deep, warm voice. "Consider that you've just woken up from a long nightmare. Now that you're awake, everything will be fine." He turned to leave, but I stopped him. "Dad, I don't want him to get away with this." My father stopped and turned to look at me. There was no longer weakness in my eyes. Instead, the flame of resentment shone. "He has trampled on my love and my sacrifice. I want him to pay the price, not just by losing me, but by losing everything." My father stared into my eyes for a long time. He wasn't surprised by my words. Perhaps he understood that his daughter, though docile, carried in her veins the strength and determination inherited from him. He nodded slightly. "I understand. Rest, justice will be served. Anyone who does wrong will undoubtedly pay for their actions. No one is an exception." My father's words were not loud or threatening, but they carried immense weight. I knew the real storm had just begun, and Marcus, he would soon have to face the wrath of a father, of a wounded lieutenant general. After I settled into my room, my father didn't return directly to his office. He went down to the kitchen and personally prepared a pot of hot Linden tea. The soft aroma of the infusion filled the space, but it couldn't dissipate the heaviness in his heart. He sat silently in an armchair in the living room, his gaze lost in the green yard, but his mind was far away. The old butler discreetly brought him a blanket. General, the wind is picking up. You should rest. The warrior general shook his head, accepting the cup of tea from the butler's hands. I'm fine, Julian. You go rest. He took a sip. The bitterness on the tip of his tongue did not seem as bitter as the pain in his heart. The image of his daughter, pale, with empty eyes, yet still trying to appear strong, tormented him. He reproached himself. If he had been stricter that year, if he hadn't yielded to his daughter, perhaps Schuyler wouldn't have suffered so much. He had trusted Marcus, believing that love could change a person, but he was wrong. Marcus had not only betrayed his daughter, but had humiliated her and his entire family. Marcus's action was not simple adultery. It was a trampling of honor. For an old soldier who valued honor above all else, this was unforgivable. The colonel's career Marcus had just achieved was partly due to being the son-in-law of a high-ranking military officer, although Marcus never knew who that officer was. He had used his family's impeccable reputation to climb up, and then used that very position to commit despicable acts. The general placed the cup on the table. His gaze was no longer sad, but cold and determined. He had been too lenient. It was time to act. He stood up and went to his library, a vast room with floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with books on military strategy and history. It was his command center, his brain. He sat at his mahogany desk, from which he had made countless important decisions. He did not rush. He simply looked silently at a photo of Schuyler as a little girl, placed with honor onto the desk. In the photo, a small Schuyler smiled from ear to ear, with her hair in two pigtails, so innocent and happy. His hand gently caressed the photo. Schuyler, Dad is sorry. Dad will get you justice. Having said that, he picked up the green Bakelite military phone, the type of secure phone used only for high-level internal communications. He dialed a short extension. Someone answered almost instantly. A grave, concise male voice resonated. At your command, General. I want you to investigate someone immediately, the general said. His voice was deep and monotonous, without emotion, but every word hit a terrible weight. Colonel Marcus Valerian of Division X Brigade Y. A thorough investigation, his moral conduct, his social relationships, his personal finances. Especially clarifies relationship with a businessman, owner of Z Construction Company, and his daughter, one Zara. I suspect there are signs of abuse of power for personal gain. There was a silence of a few seconds on the other end to take note, and then a clear response. Understood, General. We will proceed immediately. We will inform you as soon as possible. Good. Do it discreetly but thoroughly. Don't let any detail escape. That was the General's final order. At your command, General. The General hung up. The dry click of the phone resonated in the silent library like the hammer of a judge who had just passed sentence. A single call, without shouting or threats. A concise order had been issued. The immense and rigorous investigative machinery of the Army had been set in motion. Marcus, probably still immersed in alcohol and the euphoria of his victory with his mistress, had no idea that a real storm was about to break over the life and career of which he was so proud. The first 2 days after my return were spent sleeping. A deep sleep without nightmares, as if my body were trying to compensate for 5 long years of exhaustion. I didn't think about Marcus or Zara or revenge plans. I allowed myself to be weak, to let everything go in the protective embrace of my family. My father didn't bother me. He only instructed the staff to prepare my favorite dishes and relaxing herbal teas to help me sleep. He gave me a space of silence so that I could heal my first wounds myself. The morning of the 3rd day, while I was reading in my father's library, he came in with a cup of hot chamomile tea, placed it on the table, and sat across from me. "Are you feeling better?" he asked in his grave voice. I nodded with a slight smile. "Much better, Dad, as if I've woken up from a long dream." "Good, my father said. Then you should know the first news." He slid an A4 sheet of paper toward me. It was a copy of an official resolution with the red seal of his unit, a few concise lines. Colonel Marcus Valerian is temporarily suspended from his duties to facilitate the internal investigation. This resolution is effective as of the date of its signature. I read and reread those lines. A cold but satisfactory feeling ran through me. There it was, The first shot had been fired. I felt neither joy nor triumph, only a strange serenity, like watching a poisonous tree begin to be uprooted, something that had to happen. How did he react, Fan? I asked, without looking away from the document. My father took a sip of tea, his gaze lost in the distance. According to the report, at first he was stunned, incredulous, then furious, shouting that it was a mistake, that someone was trying to harm him. And finally, my father paused. Panic. I could vividly imagine the scene. Marcus, a man who considered his career and prestige as his very life, receiving that paper must have felt the world collapsing. He would start making calls, resorting to all the contacts he had cultivated so hard. He would call the superiors who had supported him, the colleagues who had acclaimed him. But what would he receive in return? Denials, evasive answers, or, worse yet, the endless ringtone. No one in their right mind would get involved with someone in the eye of a hurricane of an investigation ordered from the highest authority. And then when all the doors closed, he would think of me. He would frantically call my number, the same number he had ignored so many nights, but now he would only hear, "The number you have dialed is not available." He would realize that the wife he had despised and abandoned was actually the last lifeline he himself had cut. "He tried to call you," my father said, as if reading my thoughts. "More than 50 missed calls. I've asked the phone company to block his number. You don't have to worry anymore." I nodded. It was true. I didn't have to worry anymore. This battle was no longer in my hands. It had become the battle of justice, of military discipline. I had only lit the fuse. The fire would consume all the filth and decay by itself. Marcus's panic today was only the beginning. Long and bitter days of interrogations awaited him, facing his mistakes and the humiliation of seeing everything come to light. The following days, I lived a slow and peaceful life. I spent time rereading the old books, walking in my father's lush yard, and sometimes spending hours in the kitchen just to bake a simple cake. I was learning to rediscover myself, to find the Skylar of 5 years ago, before the title of Marcus's wife eclipsed everything. One afternoon, while tidying an old storeroom in the attic, I found a small wooden chest covered in a thick layer of dust. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it, and a whole world of memories I thought forgotten came rushing back. Inside were all the souvenirs of my adolescence, a worn leather-bound diary, letters from my best friends, my university diploma with high honors, and photos from a trip. I remembered why I had hidden my identity when I met Marcus. I had just graduated. I was a general's daughter. I had no shortage of suitors, but I always felt a lack of sincerity in their glances. They looked at me, but they seemed to see my father's shadow behind me. Did they admire me or the power of my family? And then Marcus appeared. Back then, he was just a young lieutenant without a prominent background, but with a strong will to succeed and a manly, mature look. He courted me with persistence, with small, sincere gestures. He didn't know who I was. He only knew I was Skylar, a recent international relations graduate. I thought this was the true love I was looking for, a disinterested love. And to protect that pure love, I decided to hide my identity forever. I told Marcus I was an orphan, raised by a distant relative. I disobeyed my father. I agreed to give up everything to follow him to another city and start a new life. Naively, I thought that sacrifice was noble, a proof of great love, but I was wrong. I only saw the false external sincerity without perceiving the ambition that bubbled inside him. I built a golden cage myself and locked myself in it, happy in my role as a devoted wife, a solid rear guard. I forgot that a woman is only truly happy when she is herself, when she has a career, dreams, and self-worth, and does not live dependent on anyone. 5 years, a time not too long, but enough to erode all the aspirations of a young woman. I myself had buried my past. Now, flipping through these pages of memories, I felt no regret, only a deep sorrow for myself. But fortunately, the storm that had just passed had helped me break that cage to realize my true value. The news of my divorce and my return to my father's house spread quickly in the close family circle, and the first person to look for me was none other than Helen. Helen Rivers, my best friend since high school, also the daughter of an old comrade in arms of my father. 5 years ago, Helen was the one who most strongly opposed my marriage. and that's why we were angry for a long time. That afternoon, while I was watering the flowers in the yard, Helen arrived in her car. She got out. She was no longer the mischievous girl of before, but a mature and astute lawyer, dressed in an elegant pantsuit. Seeing me, without a word, she ran to hug me. "Skylar, you're finally back," Helen said, her voice choked. "Do you know how worried I've been about you?" I hugged her back. A warm, emotional feeling ran through me. All the resentment and distance of the last 5 years seemed to vanish in that tight embrace. I realized that true friends are those who, even if you make mistakes and turn your back on them, are always there with open arms waiting for your return. "I'm sorry, Helen. I should have listened to you," I whispered. Helen released me and patted my head. "Silly, you realize it now? Come on, let's go inside. It's sunny out here." We sat in the living room. The maid served us tea and pastries. Helen examined me from head to toe and sighed. "You're so thin. That bastard didn't treat you well these 5 years, did he?" I just smiled sadly, without answering. Helen, with her usual tact, didn't press. She understood I still didn't want to talk about it. Instead, she told me about her life, her work at the law firm, the interesting cases she had handled. While I listened to her, I saw a passion and self-confidence in her eyes that made me admire her deeply. "By the way," Helen suddenly said, lowering her voice and with a more serious gesture, "about you and Marcus. The truth is, we had already heard many ugly rumors about him around here for a while." I was surprised. "What rumors? Why didn't I know anything?" Helen shrugged. "You were so in love, it's normal that you had deaf ears and blind eyes. Even if we had told you, you wouldn't have believed us." Helen told me that in his unit, Marcus was known for being a cunning man, an expert in flattering his superiors, but also very calculating. He was willing to do anything to achieve his goals. Many say that when he first approached you, he already had a hidden intention. "What intention?" "He didn't know who my father was at the time," I replied weakly. "He didn't know you were the daughter of a lieutenant general, but he knew you were the daughter of a high-ranking officer. Your father already had an important position. So for a guy with his ambition, getting close to a girl from a good family, even without knowing the details, was 1,000 times better than a normal girl, and when you later insisted on hiding your identity, it suited him perfectly. He had the label of son-in-law of an influential family to show off, but without your family controlling him. He killed 2 birds with 1 stone. He had everything calculated." Helen's analysis was like a hammer hitting my head. Cold, cruel, but incredibly logical. It turned out that from the beginning, I had been a piece on his chessboard. That so-called sincere and disinterested love that I was so proud of had actually only been a precisely calculated play. Seeing my silence, Helen took my hand. "Well, anyway, it's over now. The important thing is that you're rid of him. You have your father, me, and all of us. We won't let them hurt you anymore." Just then the doorbell rang again. A group of our old friends, all children of military officers, burst into the house. It turned out Helen had called them all to rescue me. They brought a lot of delicious food, bottles of wine, and a whirlwind of gossip and laughter. The house, usually quiet, suddenly filled with life and joy. That night we ate, talked, and laughed like old times. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living, that I was myself. I realized that happiness is sometimes not passionate romantic love, but the warmth of friendship, the sense of belonging, of being loved unconditionally. The arms of true friends were the best medicine for a broken heart. While I slowly regained peace with my family and friends, elsewhere someone lived in restlessness and anxiety. Zara, after that dramatic introduction, had officially moved into Marcus's and my apartment. She had achieved her goal, the man and the house she so craved. The first days she lived in a state of triumph and enjoyment. She threw out all my things, redecorated everything to her liking, and dedicated herself to bragging everywhere that she would soon be the wife of a young and handsome colonel. But her joy didn't last long. A few days later, Marcus received the suspension of duties notification. The news was a hard blow to Zara's dream of being Mrs. V. The man she relied on, her pride, had suddenly lost his power. Marcus became irritable, drank more than he should, and was surly with her. He was no longer the tender and compliant man of before. Zara began to feel insecure. This luxurious apartment, the expensive brand name objects, everything depended on Marcus's career. If something happened to Marcus, all of that would vanish. She didn't love Marcus. She loved his status and his money. She had bet her entire future on this card, and now she ran the risk of losing everything. That night, after Marcus went out to drink again, Zara sat alone in the cold living room. She looked around. Everything was beautiful, luxurious, but she felt empty and terrified. She picked up the phone and called her mother. "Mom, it's me," Zara said, her voice about to break. "What's wrong now? Another problem?" Her mother's voice sounded impatient on the other end. "Marcus, he's been suspended from his duties. I'm so scared. If something happens to him, what are you and I going to do?" Her mother was silent for a moment and then said, "I warned you, be careful. Did you think his wife was just anybody? Now you realize. But well, since you're in this, you have to continue. You have that pregnancy. It's your best weapon. Cling to Marcus. Don't let him escape." "But lately he's been acting strange, Mom. He gets angry about everything. He doesn't pay attention to me like before," Zara complained. "Well, you have to be sweeter with him. Men are very vulnerable when they're having a bad time. Choose your words carefully. Be compliant. By the way, what about the project your father asked him to help with? Is it done?" Her mother changed the subject, her voice full of calculation. "Not yet. He said he was stuck on the last step. And now with this, my God, that useless man," her mother shouted. "You have to pressure him. He has to sign that contract no matter what. It's our family's entire patrimony. If he doesn't succeed, we'll all end up on the street." The conversation with her mother didn't make Zara feel better. Instead, it increased her pressure. She realized she was only a pawn in her family's plan. They had pushed her into this relationship not because they wanted a good husband for her, but to take advantage of Marcus's power for the benefit of their family businesses. Just then, Marcus returned, smelling of alcohol again. Seeing Zara sitting with a funeral face, he snapped at her. "What are you doing sitting there like a statue, with that look of awake? I'm already fed up enough without having to see you like this when I get home." I'm just worried about you," Zara tried to say sweetly. "Worried about me or about your colonel's wife armchair?" Marcus scoffed with a bitter smile. "Do you think I don't know what you and your family are thinking? You're all users. When I had power, you stuck to me. Now that I'm in trouble, you're thinking of running away." How can you say that about me?" Zara was stunned, her eyes filled with tears. "Isn't it true?" Marcus shouted, slamming the table. "You're all the same. Get out of my sight, all of you." Zara was paralyzed. The first crack in that relationship built on lies and interests had appeared. She began to realize that the ship she was trying to cling to was actually sinking, and in the middle of this storm, she would have to find a way to survive on her own. The news that Marcus had been discharged and stripped of his colonel rank was given to me by my father during dinner. He didn't say it with an air of gloating, but in a monotonous tone, as if he were reading a report. But for me, and probably for Marcus, it was a death sentence for his career and his prestige. Everything he had fought to build throughout his life, both with effort and with trickery, had turned to ashes, and I didn't feel happy. Strangely, I only felt an emptiness. The initial anger had passed. Now, looking back, I only felt pity for my marriage and for Marcus himself. He had sold his integrity and his love for something so ephemeral, and it was precisely that which destroyed him. I thought that was the end for Marcus, but I was wrong. The final blow, and perhaps the most painful, did not come from me or my family. It came from the very woman for whom he had abandoned everything. A few days later, Helen called me. Her voice was tinged with irony. "Skylar, I have juicy gossip for you. That tramp has run off." I was stunned. "What? Where did she go?" "They say abroad." I had someone investigate. It turns out that right after the decision to discharge Marcus, Zara emptied the house of everything valuable, cleaned out their joint account, and disappeared. Before leaving, she left him a letter. Helen told me she had gotten the contents of the letter through a housekeeper. In the letter, Zara did not say goodbye or offer a single word of comfort. She wrote that she couldn't tie her future to a failure, that the baby she was carrying needed a father with a future, not someone about to face justice. She advised Marcus not to look for her, that everything between them was over. I was silent as Helen told me. Cruel. Pragmatic to the point of cruelty, Marcus had taken her out of a mediocre job, given her a luxury house, showered her with gifts. For her, he had lost his family, his career, his honor. And yet, when he fell from grace, she didn't hesitate to squeeze out what little he had left and turn her back on him. I could imagine Marcus reading that letter. The pain must have been greater than when he received the discharge notice, to be abandoned by everyone and then by the woman he loved, the one carrying his child. It was the ultimate humiliation, the final stab to a man's pride. And there's more, Helen continued with some hesitation. It looks like there's something weird about the pregnancy. The housekeeper said that before leaving, Zara threw away a lot of boxes of medicine. They look like prenatal vitamins, but some say it was the kind of medication used when you don't want to continue the pregnancy. My heart sank. Despite my hatred for Marcus and my contempt for Zara, a child was innocent. If Zara had really done something so cruel just to flee more easily, she was more evil than I imagined. She was not only a deserter, but a mother without humanity. I hung up the phone and sat in silence. The relationship of Marcus and Zara, what had destroyed my family, turned out to be built on foundations even more rotten and false than I knew. They united out of self-interest and separated out of self-interest. There was no love, only exploitation. Now that Marcus had lost his use value, Zara was willing to discard him, and possibly even the child she was carrying, as if he were an expired product. I no longer hated Marcus. Now he just seemed like a pathetic and pitiful man to me. He himself had destroyed his happiness by chasing an illusion, a beautiful but empty soap bubble. And when the bubble burst, all he was left with were empty hands and a bleeding heart. But my attention shifted to another mystery, a secret that had been buried for years, the small wooden chest my mother had left me. I found it earlier while tidying in the storeroom. At that time, my mind was too confused, so I just put it away. But now, in the silence of the night, something urged me to open it. The chest was made of sandalwood, very old. The corners were worn by time. The lid had no lock, only a faded brass latch. With trembling hands, I opened it. A melancholy scent of wood and old paper flooded my nose. The smell of nostalgia for the past. Inside, there was nothing of material value. The bottom was lined with faded red velvet. In the center solemnly rested a medal of military merit with a red distinction. The four-armed cross still shone, although the ribbon was somewhat frayed. Next to the medal was a black and white photograph, yellowed by time. I picked it up. In it appeared a very young man, perhaps barely over 20, dressed in an old military uniform. He had an angular, firm face and clear, deep eyes. Despite being a black and white photo, I could feel the warmth and determination in his gaze. He smiled, a kind and sincere smile. Who was this man? Why did my mother keep his photo so carefully? Gabriel, I remembered the line from my mother's letter. On the back of the photo was a handwritten inscription in violet ink. My mother's calligraphess. May 1995, the day you returned. 1995, my mother was also very young. So what was their relationship? Under the photo and the medal was a bundle of letters tied with a red silk cord. The paper was also faded, so fragile it seemed about to fall apart. Carefully, I opened one of them. It was the handwriting of the man named Gabriel. His calligraphy was firm and strong, but his words were incredibly tender. He called my mother Aurora, a name so beautiful and simple. He told her about missions in Bosnia, about the nostalgia for his home, his land, and above all, her. He promised that when the mission was over, he would return, and they would build a small country house together with a geranium garden and a small orchard. Reading those letters, I felt like I was reliving a love story in times of conflict, a pure, idealistic love. But why wasn't this man my father? What happened so they couldn't be together? In the last letter, his handwriting was more shaky. He wrote that he was about to participate in an especially dangerous mission. He asked my mother to take care of herself, to live happily, no matter what happened to him. If I don't come back, he wrote, think that I have become a bird flying freely into the sky. Don't be sad, Aurora, and find a good man to lean on. That was the last letter. After that, nothing else. My heart sank. It was possible that he really hadn't come back. That military medal was probably the only thing left of him. I sat in the darkness, tears rolling down my cheeks. I cried not only for a truncated love, but for a strange connection with the man in the photo. His gaze, his smile, why did they seem so familiar? I felt an immediate connection, an understanding that transcended time and space. The next morning, with the wooden chest in my arms, I went straight to my father's library. My heart was full of questions and a vague premonition. My father was reading the newspaper. Seeing me enter with such a serious expression, he frowned and set the newspaper aside. "What's wrong, Schuyler?" I said nothing. I simply placed the chest on his desk and carefully opened the lid. The medal and the photo of the young soldier were exposed under the lamplight. My father looked at those objects, and for an instant, I saw his face harden. A deep, very well-hidden pain. It fleetingly crossed his firm eyes. "Where did you find this?" he asked. His voice was deeper and somewhat hoarse. "In the storeroom. They were Mom's things," I replied. "Dad, who is this man? Why did Mom keep his memories so carefully?" My father was silent for a long time. He picked up the photo, and his fingers gently caressed the face of the young soldier. A heavy sigh escaped his chest. "His name was Gabriel," he finally said. "Captain Gabriel Stone. He was a comrade in arms, my best friend. Blood brothers during the years of the mission in the Balkans. A comrade, only that, I didn't believe him." "And Mom, what was her relationship with him?" I insisted, looking directly into his eyes. My father avoided my gaze, put down the photo, stood up, and walked toward the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "They were in love. A very beautiful love before I met your mother." A truth revealed, but it only confused me more. "Then why did she end up marrying you?" My father didn't turn around. His voice sounded distant. "That's life in times of war, daughter. Not all love stories have a happy ending. Gabriel died. He fell in a brutal ambush a few days before his contingent returned home. This medal was awarded posthumously for his sacrifice." I felt as if someone was squeezing my heart. He really hadn't come back. The young man who wrote those letters full of love had remained forever on a foreign battlefield. My mother must have suffered terribly. "I met your mother sometime later during a visit to Gabriel's family. She was consumed by grief. I accompanied her. I comforted her. Our love was born of empathy, of sharing the pain. I had promised Gabriel, before he left for his last mission, that if anything happened to him, I would take care of his family in Aurora. I kept my promise." My father's story sounded logical, moving, a story of love, camaraderie, and noble sacrifice. But for some reason, deep down, I felt that something didn't fit. My instinct told me that a crucial piece of the story was still hidden. My father's look when he saw the photo, that fleeting pain. It wasn't just the pain of losing a friend. "Why did you never tell me about Uncle Gabriel?" I asked. "I did not want to stir up painful memories," my father replied. "The past must be left in peace. Your mother, before she died, also asked me to. She wanted you to have a peaceful life without the shadows of the stories of our generation." He turned to look at me, his eyes sincere and full of love. "Schuyler, Marcus has already made you suffer enough. Don't worry about things that have already passed. Gabriel was a hero, and your mother and I will always be grateful for his sacrifice. Knowing that is enough." I fell silent. I knew I couldn't ask any more questions, but my father wanted to close the story, and I respected his decision. Perhaps he really wanted to protect me from a painful truth. I stood up and carefully put the objects back in the chest. "I understand, Dad. I'm sorry for making you sad." "Don't worry, daughter." My father approached and ruffled my hair. "You are now my only joy and my greatest pride. Live a good life. Be happy. That's what your mother and Uncle Gabriel would also wish." I hugged him tightly. His arms had always been my safest and firmest refuge. I would put my questions aside for now. Perhaps my father was right. I should focus on the present and the future, but the image of the young soldier named Gabriel, with his kind smile and warm gaze, had been etched into my mind. My life slowly returned to normal. During the day, I spent time reading, catching up on the economic and political knowledge I had abandoned for 5 years. My father made things easier for me by often bringing me documents, current affairs analyses, and discussing them with me. A modern woman, he would say, can not only know what about cooking, she needs to have knowledge and independent thinking. In the evenings, I usually went out with Helen and our group of friends for coffee or to the movies. They helped me reintegrate into social life to recover the smile and carelessness of youth. The pain in my broken marriage was still there, but it was no longer an open stinging wound. Instead, it began to scar, becoming a lesson learned at a high price. Meanwhile, news of Marcus reached me occasionally. After being discharged and abandoned by Zara, he had sunk into alcohol, losing all interest in life. The military investigation continued its course, and according to Helen, they had found numerous proofs that Marcus had used his position to benefit Zara's father's company. The circle of the law was closing in. I thought we would never see each other again. Our paths were now two parallel lines, but I was wrong. That morning, as usual, I went out for my morning walk on the extensive grounds of the neighborhood. As I approached the main entrance, a familiar figure suddenly appeared, blocking my path. It was Marcus, but he was no longer the imposing and elegant colonel of before. In front of me was a pathetically defeated man. He was visibly thinner, his face haggard with several days' beard. The clothes he wore were wrinkled and disheveled, and he reeked of alcohol despite the early hour. He looked at me. His eyes no longer showed arrogance, only supplication. The security guards at the entrance made a move to intervene, but I signaled them to stop. I wanted to see what new farce he was going to perform. "Skylar, I finally found you," Marcus said in a hoarse voice. "I've been waiting here for several days." I crossed my arms, looking at him coldly. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I beg you, Skylar." Marcus approached, trying to take my hand, but I took a step back. "I know I was wrong. It was all my fault. I'm a wretch. Please forgive me." He began to lament how much he had suffered and regretted since I left, how Zara had deceived him. He said he only loved me, that everything that happened had been a momentary mistake. I listened to him without any emotion. These words a month earlier might have softened me, but now they only seem ridiculous and false. Seeing that I didn't react, Marcus suddenly knelt. The knees of a man who had been a colonel collapsed before me in the middle of the pavement. "Skylar, I beg you, talk to your father, ask him to forgive me. I can't lose everything. My career is my life. If you help me this time, I promise I'll make it up to you for the rest of my life." Seeing the man kneeling at my feet provoked a bitter feeling. I didn't feel satisfaction, only a deep sadness. Sadness for a human being who had lost all his dignity. He was begging me, not because he still loved me, but because he needed my father's power to save himself. Even in this last moment, he remained a pragmatic and cowardly man. "Get up, Marcus," I said. My voice was cold as ice. "Don't make me despise you even more." Marcus looked up, his eyes full of hope. "Then will you help me?" I smiled with disdain. "What do you think? Do you think that after everything you've done to me, I would be so stupid as to go beg my father for the man who betrayed me? Your life is your career, but you almost destroyed my life that night." Marcus's face turned to stone. The smile of hope vanished. I continued. My voice was full of authority. "The path you are on today was chosen by you. You chose betrayal, lies. Now face the consequences. Stop begging like a coward. You don't deserve it." Having said that, I turned around and walked away without looking back. Marcus's desperate cry resonated behind me, but it could no longer reach my heart. Returning from my last encounter with Marcus, I didn't feel the satisfaction I had imagined. Seeing the man who was once my world kneeling so pitifully only left me with the feeling of emptiness and exhaustion. The anger had dissipated, the hatred had vanished. Only a deep melancholy remained for a dead love, and for the years of youth I had gambled in the wrong place. That night I spoke with my father in his library. I told him I no longer wanted to worry about the Marcus issue, that the investigation should follow its course according to law and military discipline. He was responsible for his mistakes, but personally I had let him go. "So your revenge is over?" my father asked, his gaze deep, as if reading my soul. I shook my head. "No, Dad, I've realized that true revenge is not destroying another person, but rebuilding my own life in a brighter way. I don't want the rest of my life to be obsessed by his shadow, neither in the form of love nor hatred. I want to put an official end to him and to the weak version of myself in the past." My father nodded, his face showing clear satisfaction and pride. My daughter has finally grown up. Letting him go is the best thing. Only when the heart is at peace can the path ahead open up. Yes, I wanted my path ahead to be completely open, and for that, I knew I should not only close the door of the past with Marcus, but also open another, a door that would lead me to my origins, to a secret I believed was intimately linked to my identity. The image of the young soldier Gabriel and the old wooden chest kept returning to my mind. "Dad," I said, "I want to know more about Uncle Gabriel." Hesitation crossed my father's face again, but this time he didn't avoid it. Perhaps he understood that this was a crucial part of my journey to rediscover myself. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," I replied. "His life, his sacrifice, and his love for Mom. I have a feeling the story is not as simple as you told me." My father was silent for a long time and then sighed. "There are truths that, when known, do not always bring happiness, Schuyler. It might hurt you." "I'm not afraid of pain," I said firmly. "After what I've been through, I don't think there's any pain that can bring me down. I only fear living in uncertainty without knowing who I really am. I need to know the truth, however cruel it may be. It's the only way to truly start a new life." Seeing the determination in my eyes, my father finally nodded. "All right, if that's what you want, but not here. There's a place you should go. There you'll find the answer you're looking for." He didn't tell me what the place was, he just gave me an address written on a small piece of paper. "Go when you feel ready," and he said. The conversation ended there, but a new journey opened in my heart. The end of my marriage to Marcus was also the starting point of a bigger story about my own life, and I knew I had to be the one to find and write the end of that story. It didn't take me long to decide. The next morning, I packed a small backpack, taking only some comfortable clothes and the wooden chest with the memories of the soldier named Gabriel. I didn't tell my father I wanted to make this journey alone. It was my personal journey, a pilgrimage to the past. The address my father gave me was not a house, but the name of a place that any American knows with deep respect, the Arlington National Cemetery. Although the note specified a lesser-known section dedicated to military officers fallen in peacekeeping missions, after a short car ride, I arrived at that solemn place in the heart of Northern Virginia. The atmosphere was different from the hustle and bustle outside. It was silent, sacred, and it seemed that every gust of wind whispered stories of the past. I looked for the section indicated in my father's note. My heart was beating faster and faster. I walked between the rows of headstones, looking for a familiar name, and then I found it, Captain Gabriel Stone, fallen in the line of duty, Bosnia, 1995. His headstone was simple like the others. I stood motionless in front of it, my trembling hands touching the cold stone. "Hello, Uncle Gabriel," I whispered. "I'm Schuyler. I've come to see you." I sat down and took the medal and the old photograph from the chest, placing them carefully on the headstone. I told him about my life, my mistakes, my falls. I didn't know why I was doing it. I just felt the need to share it with him, as if he were a close relative. At that moment, a tall, silent figure appeared behind me. I was startled and turned around. It was my father. He was there. I didn't know how long he had been there. He was wearing a civilian suit without insignia or decorations. His gaze fell on me and then on the grave, a look filled with a complexity of emotions, pain, and at the same time, serenity. "I knew you would come," my father said in a deep, hoarse voice. He approached and stood beside me in front of his old friend's grave. "What are you doing here, Dad?" I asked in surprise. "I came as soon as I saw you weren't there," he replied. "I think the time has come. There are truths that must be told in the right place. Here, in front of Gabriel, is perhaps the most suitable place." I fell silent. A strong premonition seized me. The veil of mystery I'd been seeking was about to be lifted. My father placed a small white flower on the headstone. He looked at the inscription with his friend's name, his eyes lost in a distant past. "Schuyler," he began, his voice slow, "everything I told you about Gabriel is true. He was my comrade, my best friend. Your mother and he loved each other deeply. But there is a truth, the most important one, that I have kept from you all these years." He turned to look at me, his eyes filled with an indescribable emotion. He took my hand, a soldier's calloused hand, but incredibly warm. "Gabriel wasn't just my comrade. He is your real father." The last words, spoken softly, fell like a clap of thunder. My ears were ringing. The world around me seemed to stagger. I looked at my father, then at the headstone with the name Captain Gabriel Stone, my real father. The man in the photo, the one who wrote those letters full of love, was the one who had given me life. "No, it can't be," I stammered, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Then you—" "I am the man who promised him I would take care of you and your mother," my father interrupted, his voice broken. "That year, before Gabriel left for his last mission, he had a bad feeling. He entrusted your mother, who was already pregnant with you, to me. He made me promise that if he didn't return, I would take his place as your father. I would give you a complete family and protect you from all the storms of life." Tears began to roll down my cheeks, a truth too overwhelming, too difficult to assimilate. It turned out I wasn't the orphan Marcus had despised. I was the daughter of two extraordinary men. One had given me life, and the other had dedicated his life to me. Gabriel's last mission was extremely dangerous, my father continued. It consisted of dismantling a very powerful espionage network. He successfully completed the mission, but fell heroically. His enemies were very influential. Their tentacles reached far. To protect you, to protect the only blood left of Gabriel, your mother and I decided to hide your identity forever. I legally adopted you. I gave you my last name. Only then could you grow up in peace. Now I understood everything. The pain in my father's eyes every time he looked at Gabriel's memories was not just the pain of losing a friend, but that of a man who had carried a secret, a sacred promise, on his shoulders all his life. I understood why my mother kept those objects so carefully. It was her way of remembering the man she loved and preserving a part of her roots for her daughter. I sobbed, hugging him tightly. I cried for the cruel fate of my parents, Gabriel and Aurora. I cried for the silent sacrifice of my father, General Alexander, and I cried for myself. After so many years, I had finally found my roots. My father gently stroked my trembling back. "Don't cry anymore, daughter. Your father, Gabriel, was a hero. You have to be proud of him. I'm sure that from heaven, he and your mother are watching over you and protecting you." We stood for a long time in front of my father, Gabriel's grave. For the first time in my life, I felt the sacred connection of parental love. Despite the barrier between life and death, I felt his love enveloping me. When my emotions calmed down, my father, Alexander, took me to a quiet place, a small country house belonging to an old comrade, a serene place so we could talk. We sat on the porch overlooking a tranquil valley. My father placed a wooden military trunk on the table, much larger than my mother's small chest. It was worn by the years, and the name Captain Gabriel Stone could still be read on the lid. "This, my father said in a warm voice, is the true legacy your father left you." I felt a surge of curiosity, a legacy. Had my father Gabriel left me some property? But I knew that a soldier's legacy couldn't be about money. My father Alexander opened the trunk. Inside there was no gold or jewelry, but worn notebooks, manuscripts, and hundreds of ordered letters. Your father Gabriel was not only a brave soldier, he also had an incredibly rich soul. He loved to read, write, and always reflected on life and his ideals. He took out a leather-bound diary and handed it to me. This is his diary. He recorded almost his entire military life, from his early days to life or death battles. Here, there are not only bullets and bombs, but also camaraderie, love for the homeland, and very deep reflections on life and death. I turned the pages, trembling. My father Gabriel's handwriting was firm and decided. He wrote about a soldier's fear of death, but also about the courage forged in love for those left behind. He wrote about the cruelty of war, but also about his unwavering faith in a peaceful tomorrow. Every line was imbued with sincerity and a noble philosophy of life. Your father always said, Judith, my father Alexander continued, that a man's greatest legacy is not wealth or fame, but the character and ideals he leaves to his descendants. He wanted you to read these lines when you grew up to understand what kind of man your father was, why he lived and fought. In addition to the diaries, there were many books on history, philosophy, and literature in the trunk, each with annotations and underlined passages by my father Gabriel. I realized that I had inherited my love for books and reading from him. And finally, at the bottom, there was a thick bundle of letters. These are the letters your mother sent him, my father Alexander said nostalgically. Your father Gabriel always carried them with him like a treasure. I think you should also read them to better understand their love. I held the letters, feeling a strange solemnity. They were not just love letters, they were the testimony of a grand love that had overcome bombs and the separation of war. I sat on that porch, reading every diary, every letter. The afternoon sun gilded the landscape. I cried and laughed with his stories. I felt like I was reliving the entire life of the father I never knew. I understood it. The legacy he left me was more valuable than anything in the world. It was a great character, a noble ideal of life, an infinite love. He didn't give me a life of luxury, but he gave me an unshakable spiritual foundation, a torch to illuminate my path for the rest of my life. My journey to my origins had ended, but a new journey, that of living a life worthy of my father's legacy, had just begun. Returning from that revealing journey, I felt like a new person. A deep and solid peace settled in my soul, something I had never experienced before. The secret of my origins did not hurt me. On the contrary, it filled the gaps in me, giving me a firm spiritual anchor. I knew who I was and where I belonged. A few days later, during dinner, my father Alexander suddenly put down his silverware and looked at me with an expression of deep reflection. I hadn't seen him like that in a long time, with a mixture of sadness and self-reproach. "Schuyler," he said, his voice graver than usual, "I've been thinking a lot these days. I want to apologize to you." I was surprised. "Apologize? Why, Dad?" "I've been a bad father," he sighed. His shoulders seemed to slump. "I didn't know how to protect you. I let you suffer for 5 years. I was too trusting of Marcus. I wasn't firm enough to stop you. I betrayed your trust and the promise I made to Gabriel." Seeing my father, a man who had always been an unshakable pillar to me, tormenting himself in that way, broke my heart. I got up, sat next to him, and took his calloused hand. "Don't say that, Dad," I said with a lump in my throat. "You are not to blame at all. You have always been the best father in the world. The fault was mine for being so naive and stubborn, for not listening to you. I was the one who chose the wrong path." I looked him directly in the eyes with total sincerity. "During these 5 years, even though I wasn't by your side, I know you always watched over me from a distance. And when I fell, the first person I thought of, the only one who could save me, was you. You didn't break your promise to my father, Gabriel. You gave me a family, unconditional love. You did everything a father can do and much more. I should be the one apologizing to you." My father, Alexander, said nothing, but I saw that his eyes were reddened. He squeezed my hand tightly, a gesture that was worth more than 1,000 words. At that moment, I felt a deep connection between us, free from blame and regret, filled only with love and understanding. "The past is in the past," I continued with a smile. "Let's not talk about it anymore. I'm okay now. Really, I've learned my lesson. Now I just want to live well so you can be proud, and so my parents in heaven can also smile." My father Alexander nodded and stroked my head, a tender gesture he used to make when I was a child. "My daughter has grown up." That night we talked for hours, not about the painful past, but about the future. He asked me what my plans were. I told him I needed time to think, but deep down, I knew that my father Gabriel's legacy had sown a seed in me, a new ideal of life, and I would dedicate the rest of my life to cultivating it. My father's apology did not make me see him as weaker. On the contrary, it increased my respect and love for him, because I understood that only truly great men who love their children have the courage to admit their mistakes. The following days I spent most of the time in what we now called Gabriel's library. My father Alexander had the military trunk and all the memories of my biological father brought in and organized in a dedicated room. It became my sacred space. I devoured every page of his diaries, every book he read. The more I read, the more I admired his character and his ideals. My father Gabriel was not only a soldier, he was a man with a compassionate heart and a vision for the future. In his diaries, he not only wrote about the war, but also about his concerns for peace. He worried about comrades who would return with physical and psychological wounds, about the widows and orphans of war. A passage from his diary marked me forever. "The greatest sacrifice is not death, but being forgotten by those who live. We fight not to be remembered, but so that those who remain have a better life. And the responsibility of those who enjoy peace is to take care of those who made it possible. Those words illuminated my path. His words illuminated my path. I knew what I had to do. I didn't want to go back to diplomacy or business. I wanted to do something meaningful, something that would continue my father Gabriel's ideal and be a way to thank life for this second chance. I started researching foundations and social organizations. I wanted to create a foundation to help military families, struggling veterans, and especially to support the education of their children. It was the most practical way to honor those who sacrificed themselves. After a week of preparation, I presented a detailed project to my father, Alexander. He listened to me, passing from surprise to attention, and finally to a look filled with pride and emotion. "Schuyler, that's a wonderful idea, very humane. I didn't know you thought so deeply." "I've had two great fathers who have taught me," I smiled. "My father Gabriel gave me the ideal, and you gave me the strength to carry it out. I want to call the foundation Polar Star." My father Alexander paused for a moment. "The Polar Star, a symbol of guidance and constancy, is a very significant name." He nodded with emotion. "And where will you get the funds?" "I'll use all my savings and sell some jewelry." He shook his head. "The money is not necessary. Don't worry, I will support you. Consider it part of my responsibility to my former comrades. You just focus on making the foundation work effectively and transparently." And so a new chapter in my life began. With the help of my father Alexander in the paperwork and Helen in the legal part, the Polar Star Foundation was quickly born. I immersed myself in the work with all my passion. I no longer had time for sadness or resentment. Every day was filled with meaning. I had found my path, a path of responsibility and service. And on this path, I felt that my two fathers were always by my side, watching and smiling. Months later, the trial of Marcus and his accomplices was held. I received a subpoena as an interested party. I hesitated to go. All the hatred had vanished, and I didn't want to see him again. But I finally decided to attend, not to gloat over his downfall, but to put an official and public end to everything. I went with Helen, dressed in a simple dark suit. I sat in silence, observing. The military courtroom was solemn. When they led Marcus in, dressed in a prisoner's uniform, emaciated and lifeless in his gaze, I felt a mixture of emotions. Our eyes met for an instant. I saw surprise, then shame, and finally, a belated regret. I simply nodded calmly and looked away. To me, he was now just another defendant. The trial lasted all morning. All his crimes were read out, backed by irrefutable evidence, abuse of power, bribery, immoral conduct. With each accusation, his head sank lower. In his final statement, he stood up and addressed me and my father, who was also present. He cried. "I'm sorry," Hunt said, his voice broken. "I ask for your forgiveness, General, for betraying your trust. And I ask for your forgiveness, Schuyler, the wife I failed to value. Ambition blinded me. I destroyed my own happiness. I don't ask for mercy because I don't deserve it. I only hope this sentence gives me time to repent of my sins." I listened to his words with calmness. His repentance seemed sincere, but it came too late. A broken mirror could never be the same again. The court sentenced him to a long prison term and expulsion from the army. As they led him away, he passed by me. He didn't look at me anymore. His slumped back was the image of defeat and solitude. I left the courthouse with Helen. The sun was shining, and I felt an immense relief. An old chapter of my life had closed definitively, not with revenge, but with justice. My life continued, busy and full of purpose, with the Polar Star Foundation. We organized scholarships, built houses for veterans. Every grateful smile was my greatest reward. A few times I received letters from Marcus from prison. He spoke of his regret, of how he was reading and studying, trying to be a better person. He said that when he was released, he would return to his hometown and start from scratch with honest work. I was happy for him. Everyone deserves a second chance if they truly repent. I never replied to him. It was best for both of us. The winter of that year, we organized our first major project, bringing aid to a remote mountain town in the Appalachian Mountains, where many military families lived in difficult conditions. I prepared every package, every scholarship. The journey was long and winding, but the clean mountain air and the beauty of the landscape filled me with a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. In the modest school in the town, I saw the purest smiles and the brightest eyes on the children's faces. I realized that happiness is not about receiving, but about giving. In the evening, we had dinner with the soldiers at the border post, a simple but delicious meal full of laughter and songs. For the first time in years, I laughed wholeheartedly without reservations. That night, sleeping in a small guest room, listening to the whistle of the wind in the mountains, I felt completely at peace. I had found my path. During the gift giving the next day, a little girl fainted. Everyone was alarmed. Just then, a man in a military doctor's uniform appeared. He was young, with a kind face, but with a professional and calm demeanor. "It's just a fever seizure. She'll be fine," he said, reassuring the mother as he carried the girl to the infirmary. Later, we went to visit her. She was already better. The young doctor greeted us with a smile. "I'm Dr. Luke Peters, in charge of the aid station. Nice to meet you." We talked for a good while. Luke had graduated with honors from the military academy and had volunteered to come to this remote area. He loved the land and its people. His way of speaking was humble and sincere, but his eyes shone with a beautiful idealism. He reminded me of my father, Gabriel. I felt an immediate connection, a harmony between two souls that shared a common purpose. Before we left, he saw us off. "Thank you, Skylar and the Polar Star Foundation. We hope to see you again soon." "Of course," I smiled. "We'll be back. Goodbye, Dr. Peters." As the car drove away, I saw his figure waving. The image of the military doctor with his kind smile remained etched in my mind. It wasn't love at first sight, but a feeling of appreciation born from the affinity of our spirits. A small, warm seed had just been planted in my heart. I returned home and told my father everything. When I mentioned Luke, he smiled knowingly. "Dr. Peters, I've heard of him, a brilliant and principled young man. He reminds me of someone I knew." I knew who he was referring to. I smiled. "Yes, he's a good person." "My daughter is also a good person," my father said, his eyes filled with pride. "I'm very happy, Skylar. Happy that you found your path and the joy of living." A year later, I'm sitting on a patio near the Central Park. It's an autumn sunset. The air is cool, and the park is tinged with ochres and golds. My life has changed a lot. The Polar Star Foundation has grown. My father has already retired. I feel fulfilled, independent, useful. The past with Marcus is just that, a distant memory. My phone vibrates. It's a message from Luke, a photo of the children from the Appalachian town smiling. "The children keep asking when you're coming back to visit them," he writes. I smile, a smile that comes from the heart. During this year, we have kept in touch. Our relationship has grown slowly, tenderly, and unhurriedly. We both understand that true feelings need time. "Soon," when I reply. "When the first snow covers the mountains, I'll be back." I put away my phone and take a deep breath. The future is uncertain. I don't know if Luke and I will walk the same path, but one thing I do know, I'm no longer afraid. I'm ready to open my heart, to accept the good things life offers me. The road is long, but I will walk it with a peaceful heart, a free soul, and an unwavering faith in tomorrow.